Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for some more people to join, but for now, I will explain the interpretation for you. So if you could click on the globe at the bottom of your screen, and please select either Spanish, English, or French. Please do not leave it on off. Thank you. And Annelle, if you could run through that in French, maybe.
Bonjour à tous, donc vous pouvez écouter toute la session en français. Il suffit donc de cliquer sur le globe qui est en bas de votre écran et sélectionner la langue française si vous voulez écouter toute la session en français.
And Hector, I don't know if you could maybe come into the off channel and explain the Spanish for me. Thanks. Okay, if everyone has the translation, hopefully, we should be able to start. I think if anyone has any issues, please just message GCAP Global, which is me in the chat, and I can help you.
Welcome, everybody. Paul, can you hear us?
Yes.
I think we are ready to start.
Okay. Are you starting with the introductory mechanisms you're inviting, or should we go ahead?
Okay, so Rose, is there anything more to say on the interpretation?
No, I think that's it for the interpretation, and I'll be sharing the links to the programs in Spanish, French, and English for everybody in the chat, so please access them. Thank you.
Dear friends, welcome. Greetings to you all the representatives and dignitaries who have joined from across the globe. Bonjour, buongiorno, salam, hola, namaste, jai bhim, opera Roma, and a warm welcome to the People's Global Assembly. We are living in an unprecedented times. On the one hand, the COVID-19 has cast its spell on us all, and on the other hand, climate change is real and causing havoc across the globe. And yet, on the other hand, elected autocracies have been crushing the body politic, as well as the civil society across several countries. But we need to remember that through this all, the communities are resilient and are building bridges, not walls. People are reaching out, not turning back. They're walking miles and miles, as we have seen in some countries during the COVID. Women are standing up, not bowing down, and youth are not taking it sitting down. This is both a human crisis of manic proportions, but also social and economic crisis we have on our hands. But if you do not address this global crisis, the COVID, the climate change aspect, inequalities will grow, both income and social inequalities, and the elected autocracies that we have seen blooming across the globe will decimate the human spirit across the globe. We are here today not just to remember and lament, but to remember ourselves, to remind the people who make the decisions that you cannot forge ahead without building alliances, without keeping people at the center. Our demand for a better world where no one is left behind continues to be a cry. We have representatives here and in the whole Global Assembly, as you may have already seen, at least 45 countries we have seen people have registered, Indigenous communities, communities discriminated on work and descent, women, LGBTQI, elderly, and people with disabilities, and several other identities. This is the diversity we are celebrating today. This year's UNGA theme will focus on building resilience through hope to recover from the COVID-19, rebuild sustainably, respond to the needs of the planet, respect the rights of the people, and revitalize United Nations. To be able to achieve this, we need to build resilient and inclusive economy, not just on words, not just on paper. Really, how inclusive can our economies be? I would like to remind ourselves the powerful words spoken long ago by Martin Luther King. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all of us indirectly. So we have a role to play, and we believe we will overcome. I think that's very important. We cannot say there is no alternative. We cannot say there is no hope. We will overcome, whether it is COVID, whether it is the elected democracies, whatever is the spirit, we will not lay it and take it lying low. This is the time we must come together to heal the damage we have done to the earth, to support vulnerable communities and step forward for the rights of the marginalized. This cannot take place without building and pushing for a stronger agenda 2030. Most of it still remains on paper, many of the things. And I think this is time that we ask not much for the policy, but the policy implementation that we need. We need to have greater monitoring and accountability systems. We are no ordinary women, men, or transgender. We are here to fulfill a purpose driven by a desire to see a more equitable world. And for this, we should not stop here. Let the words of UN General Assembly whisper and crush our cries. We need to cry forward. Let the leaders declare their solidarity, and let the world leaders be held accountable for where we are today. This moment, we are here to be seized to build a strong and sustainable future for our children and their children. I end with what Greta Thunberg had to say. We can't save this world by playing by the rules, because the rules have to be changed. Everything needs to change, and we feel it needs to start today. Yes, we need to change these rules. Let's do it. I hereby declare the People's Assembly open, and I encourage all of you to continue with us this journey for the next 2 days. I know it's a massive program. When I saw that program, I wondered how the whole council and the partners have put it together. I think it would not have been possible without the enthusiasm that all the partners have made and given this push here. I encourage all of you, especially here, the UN leaders, elected representatives. We have several musicals that are coming, a global march that is there towards the end, several panel discussions. So come, let's make this noise together. And without this noise, I think our silence will mean that we agree to what is happening. And so we need to rise up. We call upon all UN agencies, the world leaders, to come together to urgently build in sustainable solutions that is equitable, inclusive, intersectional, looking at gender, people with disabilities, people discriminated on work and descent, like Dalits, like Roma, Kilambola, and several others, LGBTQ and other oppressed, vulnerable people. So I invite now, we have a tremendous panel. And we are really pressed for time. I request Ingo Ritz, the director, the global director of Global Call to Action Against Poverty, to give us an overview of the partners and the key principles that we are holding this. Over to you, Ingo. Ingo, can you
Yes,
unmute?
hello, everybody. So I'm also very happy to welcome you to the Global People's Assembly. It's a great moment where we all come together. You know, today the UN General Assembly high-level debate starts. So this is part of the Global Week of Action Act for SDGs. So thank you, Paul, for the introduction, and we will have great speakers to set the political tone in this opening. I just would like to start to thank and mention the partners who are part of this People's Assembly who made this possible. So we have more than 30 global, regional, and also national civil society networks from all kind of different constituencies. So you can see here on my screen. That's too many to mention them all, but I need to say that I'm really grateful to all of you to make this possible. So of course the overall preparation, but especially I'm really excited about the good sessions, the great content bringing together. So Sarah will explain the program a bit later, but also, for example, the declaration. So we have already get a lot of inputs into the declaration that will make it a strong voice also towards the UN General Assembly. Just thank you also to our funders, so Bread for the World Germany, also then the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, the New York office, and the European Union support this event. Special thank also to our team. So Sarah Franklin, as the coordinator of the Global People's Assembly, did a wonderful job. Thanks a lot, Sarah. Then we have Rose Heffernan doing the technical coordination, which is also extremely important, and thanks a lot. And also we have Anna Elde Weyrak from Women Engaged for a Common Future, working with us on the social media and supporting also the technical team. So just to say, the most important is, of course, as this is the People's Assembly, that people from the grassroots organizations and representatives of marginalized groups speak. So that is, of course, a challenge at the global level. But we follow the principle, nothing about us without us. So we have several speakers from around the world. And we have the regional assemblies. They also bring together the inputs from the different countries and local people's assemblies. So you can see on this map, we have this yellow stars for national people's assemblies. So there are 28 in September. And all of this is the basis for the global people's assembly. So this will be brought together also in the declaration. So many of them happened before, but they will also continue during the Global Week of Action. Thanks to all. I wish us a fruitful discussion, and I'm also looking forward to have a great social media action at the end in the Global People's March on Thursday at 2 p.m. GMT. And there's another key moment of this website that people can bring in their messages. So I would like to give over to Jorge from Spain, who actually is the founder of this website and developed this together with us to make it possible that people from around the world can bring in their messages. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingo. Thanks a million. It's a real pleasure to be with you, with all of you. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm going to share my screen so I can properly show you this webpage that Ingo was talking about. So this is the webpage in which we are trying to communicate all this week of action. If you go and type in peoplesassembly.global, you will get to this webpage. The idea is, as you can see there, is to welcoming everyone from all around the world to the virtual People's Assembly that we are starting today. As we see there, we're in the middle of a global inequality crisis, and COVID-19 has made these worse. So what we are asking to the people all around the world, in every country, is what are your priorities for a just recovery? We want to know. We want to bring your word, we want to bring your priorities, your worries to the global level, and we want to bring them to the United Nations General Assembly. As you can see there in the map, this is a very powerful image. The map, the global map with all the messages from all the people all around the world. Here, people can send their images and everyone can see them, okay? The webpage is translated for the moment into English, as you can see there on the right top corner, English, French, and Spanish for the moment, okay? So if you want, if you type in peoplesassembly.global and select the language that you are more comfortable in, you can follow the whole presentation with me, okay? And down here, of course, like every web page has the possibility to share on Twitter or Facebook. And it has another section in which we try to explain who are we, okay? Who is GCAP and what is GCAP trying to achieve, okay? This is being developed, as Ingo said, in cooperation with the Global Citizenship Foundation, which is a Spanish foundation with a global scope and a global mission to try to promote global citizenship. There is also a link to the program, okay, to the program for this Global Week of Action, okay? If you press there and you click in the program, you will go there. You can see the whole calendar and all the set of events that are programmed for today and the next days, okay? I get back. And here are the connected campaigns, because this is not a campaign in isolation. This campaign is coordinated with other campaigns in which GCAP is also working in, okay? Now, what is the main thing of this webpage? The main thing is, as I said, to invite the people to write their own message. So if you go there and write, you can write your message. You just click there. I want to write my message in the map, and I just type in my name, Jorge, my surname, Serrano, in my case, and you can do it with me. I invite you to do the same thing. You just go to peoplesassembly.global, click to that button and say, in my case, it's Madrid. I'm in Madrid right now, and Spain, okay? I put on my email, and what is my demand about? My demand in this case is about inequality and social justice. I'm gonna paste, I don't have it anymore. I'm gonna ask for a more just balance of power in the global level and democracy. For example, of course, we could talk about democracy in the global level, the balance of power. We could talk about inequality. We could talk about inequality in income, or the huge break, the huge gap that is starting to, or is happening since a few decades ago between the income on capital and the income from work, from wages. We can talk about the inequality among different wage incomes. We can talk about the fiscal inequality, how the taxes paid by capital are getting lower and lower, and the taxes paid by the workers are getting higher and higher in terms of indirect taxes, which is a very, very big thing that is happening in every country in the world. We can talk about climate change. We can talk about the right for vaccines for everyone in every country. We can talk about the patents, how we get access to patents and how we have to pay huge money for those patents. We can talk about how are we going to finance the access of those patents. For example, how the IMF should issue SDRs, special drawing rights, to finance the access of patents for all the low-income countries. As you can see, we can talk about almost anything, but not only in the global level. One of the most important things of this map is that we are inviting people in very local environments to ask for the actual demands. For example, maybe people will only say, I just want a closer school for my kids. I just want better education. I just want access to health services in my neighborhood. That is very powerful. It doesn't have to be in a global level. It could also be in a very, very local. And by writing that, we send that local demand to the United Nations General Assembly. And we are saying, look how many people are asking for better education in their schools, or look how many people are asking for better health services. The global system is not working. Not only the national system, the global system is not working because those local demands are not being satisfied. So there are many, many ways of using this webpage. And of course, we can send our demand there and then communicate it, spread the word around through the different social networks. Well, I am aware of the legal privacy policy, and I am going to press send. And look what happens.
Jorge, we need to be aware of time.
And I press send. Now, and I understand that many know it's taken a while. And it says, thank you, Jorge. We have positioned you in the map. And I say, okay, thank you very much. And I see my message there in Madrid, Spain. And I love this image. And as I love this image, I'm going to print it, print the screen, and I'm going to share it in Facebook. I'm going to save the image. I'm going to share it in Facebook or in Twitter and say, I've joined this. I have joined in this tool, and I encourage other people to do the same. So I encourage you to do this, to send your message, to join the conversation, to ask for your demands, and to spread the word and encourage other people to do the same. Thank you very much, Ingo. And I stop sharing now.
Thank you, Jorge. It's really lovely the way that you've explained. It's fascinating. I've been hearing about it from the time you've started to build and share it in all preparations. It's fantastic. And I request all the leaders and network heads here, kindly share this across very virulently and actively, because I think the more number, I'm sure we have a way of communicating this to not just the UN, but also at the domestic level. We should be able to build this as a way in which we can ask our leaders and hold them accountable in ways. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Friends, we have here 6 themes which we'll need to be looking at. We have people's vaccine and health, climate and environmental justice, human rights, and human rights and austerity and social protection, financing for development, and pathways for peace from conflict. So we have great speakers, and I'll introduce them. I don't think we need introduction to most of them because most of us know, and they're very famous. And we put some of them towards the end so that you won't run away. So please, I'm very happy to invite Peter Kamalingin, who will be speaking to us. He's from Oxfam, who's the advocacy director, and he will be speaking to us about the UN at 75 and the kind of interventions, demands that we should be looking at. Over to you, Peter. Peter, you have 4 minutes, and I'm very sorry, we will be ringing the bell at 4 minutes, and I hope you will stop. Otherwise, there will be another extra 30 seconds, but beyond that, it will be very difficult for us to continue. So thank you very much. Go ahead, over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul. I will respect the time. I am from Africa, and normally we would require time, but I will respect time. Thank you very much. And I want to thank you, Paul, and the team, and also organizer of this year's Global People's Assembly. As Paul has said, I come from Oxfam, and I bring you greetings from Oxfam, and also from the coalition of the UN We Need. And even more relevantly, I carry with me to you the enduring pain of Africa and the African people, whose interactions with the world, particularly Europe and the Americas over the centuries, has more often than not left it on the receiving end. Today, on this week, as the UNGA 76 meets, we are confronted with a more unequal world, as we've had even from the other preparatory assemblies. More than before, we are confronted with a more unequal world. And we know and can agree that this COVID-19 pandemic has already taken a disproportionate toll on billions of people living in poverty. And for the last months, inequitable access to vaccines has deeply widened the gap between the rich and the poor. And the trajectory from all we see is likely to persist for years to follow. So if the world was any closer to achieving the SDG goals before COVID-19, we are now clear that sadly, we are far from that reality after COVID-19. And yet, the powers with the means to act and change the on us, they are blind or lack a conscience. The multilateral system we work with or work in has failed to meaningfully check the excesses of profit, but time is running out for billions of people. I have 3 points, Paul. First, the most urgent, those of us who are part of the People's Vaccine Alliance are asserting that the only way to get the SDGs on track is to end the pandemic. And the people's vaccine accessible to all free of charge is the way to do that. A few powerful countries are still blocking this and keeping the rest of humanity behind. They are choosing to help pharmaceutical corporations make more billions of dollars in profits instead of allowing billions of people across the world to be vaccinated. It is the Secretary General who said, we cannot be safe until all of us are safe, and he's right. Second, we can't simply go back to normal. We need a plan to fight inequality most urgently in every country with time-bound, specific, measurable targets. And some countries, small ones like Sierra Leone, are showing us that this can be done through deliberate investment on education and also deliberate efforts to include women. Yes, it can be done by all governments committing to a global tax regulatory regime under the UN that can effectively stop illicit financial flows that continues to bleed many parts of the world, including Africa, where more than $60 billion every year is lost to IFS. There's an array of solutions to deliver such a plan, but the biggest legacy of the deadly pandemic has to be that access to healthcare is a right for all, not a privilege for the rich. We need quality universal healthcare in every country. That is one of the most powerful economic, but also gender equalizers, because we know women and girls are disproportionately impacted by every inequality everywhere. It may be noted that even before the pandemic, 10,000 people died each day for lack of access to healthcare. Countries like Costa Rica and Thailand have shown us that you actually don't need to be a super rich nation to achieve this. What is most needed is political intent, the will to act. And third and finally, people living in poverty around the world already feel the impacts of climate crisis. Indeed, it shouldn't take the wildfires in California to make the polluting rich to wake up. I hope they now have woken up anyway. People across Africa have dealt with effects of climate change for years. Now it is time for action. The emissions of the richest people are killing us and robbing us of our livelihoods. We need to radically bring down emissions. We need real zero targets, not vague net zero targets. We need a huge increase in climate financing for people already living through catastrophe. The sum of these parts is that we must overcome a global economic system that remains extractive, racist, exclusive, and shall I add, colonial. And this year's UNGA must set a serious tone in that direction. The response to all of this is a response of equality, of justice, of hope. That is the hope found in the Secretary General's Our Common Agenda. That hope is found in what activists are calling for. That is the hope that women and men and girls and boys on this continent have. They are not simply dreaming of a better future. No, they just want to not be prevented by the injustice and the inequality dealt to them by the richest countries and the richest people from claiming the better future that is their right. We welcome the call for a summit of the future in 2023 and World Social Summit in 2025, and commit to ensure that the diverse voices of civil society, people from different parts of the world, and the most marginalized are fully and meaningfully included in the preparatory processes, but most importantly, in the decision making. I thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter, for this very clearly depicting the inequalities that are completely overcoming us. Till now, one level of inequalities, and in the pandemic, instead of addressing them, we have seen how the northern countries are very clearly going back and perpetuating these inequalities. And you have very clearly shown us that. Thank you very much. And also thank you for keeping time a little over. I request my colleagues who are helping in keeping the time to please ring the bell after 4 minutes so that we can ensure that all of us have. Thank you very much, Peter. I'm very happy to invite Ms. Maaza Seyoum. She leads the Africa Alliance and also a leader of the Global People's Alliance, Global People's Vaccine Alliance. Thank you, and over to you, Maaza.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. It's truly an honor to be here. I speak as a representative of the African Alliance, not the leader, but a representative of the African Alliance, which is a feminist Pan-African civil society organization. And I'm also here on behalf of the People's Vaccine Alliance, as you said. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the PVA, it is a growing movement of organizations, academics, faith leaders, activists, and COVID-19 survivors fighting for equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines for all. So now I want to take us back to December 8th of last year, when we watched in awe as that first Pfizer vaccine was administered in the UK. That achievement was reached thanks to unprecedented global research collaboration and taxpayer investment, as well as people volunteering to participate in trials around the world, including in Africa. Since then, several other vaccines have been found safe and effective. So we can say that science has succeeded, but sadly, humanity is once again failing. Having triumphed over the scientific challenges, our biggest challenge and our biggest barrier now is inequality, as you have said and as Peter has said. So today, 10 months after that first Pfizer vaccine was administered, just 2% of people living in the world's lowest income countries have been vaccinated. This, while the majority of people in rich countries are fully vaccinated, and some countries are even beginning to administer, as we've seen, booster shots. Meanwhile, 10,000 people die of the virus every single day. So this vaccine apartheid is immoral and foolish. Scientists have warned us that failing to vaccinate people around the world as quickly as we can will lead to the development of new variants that threaten public health everywhere. We've already seen this happen. Meanwhile, pharmaceutical companies, after benefiting from taxpayer investment for the development of these vaccines, refuse to share technology and know-how that will allow a ramp up of production by capable companies around the world. With thinly, very, very thinly veiled racism, they imply that factories in Africa and Asia would not be able to manufacture their vaccines. And then they continue to overcharge for the available supply. 9 pharma CEOs have become billionaires in the last year. As this is happening, many rich governments are blocking the approval of a temporary suspension of intellectual property rules called for by over 100 other countries. The waiver proposed by India and South Africa would lift World Trade Organization IP restrictions on the production of vaccines and other COVID-19 technologies for capable manufacturers across the world. Germany, while blocking the TRIPS waiver, has vaccinated more than 101 countries combined have vaccinated. So let's think about that for a moment. There are 195 countries in the world, and Germany, just Germany, has vaccinated more people in their own country than the combined number of people vaccinated in 101 other countries. And they're doing that while blocking poorer countries from having access to those same vaccines. So we often feel angry and hopeless, but we still go forward. The People's Vaccine Alliance has developed some concrete asks of the world, and I'm here to share them with you as the UN General Assembly goes into session. So the world must, number one, commit to the WHO's plan to vaccinate 40% of the world's population by the end of this year and 70% by the middle of next year. We are woefully behind on this. Number two, ensure that vaccine technology and know-how is shared by pharmaceutical companies. Number three, support the proposal by India and South Africa at the WTO to temporarily waive relevant IP rules. Number four, invest public funding to increase vaccine R&D and manufacturing capacity in developing countries. And finally, reallocate the vaccine doses now. Countries with vaccine oversupply that have already achieved high vaccination coverage must urgently redistribute vaccines. We demand transparency and a real timeline to make this happen. So I hear the bell and I'm wrapping up. I just want to say that as African civil society and as the People's Vaccine Alliance, we are not asking for charity, we are asking for justice and common sense. What this pandemic has reminded us is that we are all in this together. We say to the rich countries, your hoarding will not save you, your apartheid will not save you. None of us is safe until we are all safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Maaza. Really, really powerful. This vaccine apartheid must end today. And the TRIPS waiver that we're demanding and making sure that the reallocation of vaccines, on the one hand, vaccines are there in the go downs while people, you said 10,000 people a day are dying. I think this is something that we really need to take it. Thank you so much for very clearly, and especially for also being so specific with clear demands and also making it on time. Thank you very much. I have now great pleasure in inviting, Ms. Mithika Mwenda, Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Over to you, Mithika.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, and it's a great pleasure to be associated with this People's Assembly for the second time. This gathering is taking place at a unique time in the recent history of the world. Over the last 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused unimaginable pain to communities across Africa and the world. People already deep in poverty have lost their sources of livelihoods, jobs, and what have you, as countries restrict travel and shut out markets. The climate crisis, which has gone unresolved for too long, has made these pains worse. From Madagascar through my country, Kenya, and the Sahel region of Africa, all over the world, severe droughts have caused famines and left millions of children malnourished. In the past 2 years, we have also witnessed gaping inequalities and the lack of global solidarity. The trillions of dollars that rich countries successfully raised within a few months to tackle COVID-19 was unbelievable, given that for years they failed to respond. Similarly, the other threats, that is the climate crisis. There is only one possible explanation for this contradiction. climate change impacts primarily affect poor countries, poor communities, and poor people, whereas wealthy nations were hit the hardest by COVID-19. Thus, a difference to suffering in the global south continues to be self-evident in the unequal access to badly needed COVID-19 vaccines in the poor countries, and particularly in Africa. It is amazing how poorly veiled the efforts of rich countries to starve Africa and other developing nations of essential doses has been. We have equally learned that despite the accumulation of global wealth in the hands of a few nations this century, we are all ill-prepared to deal with the disruptions beyond certain threshold. In this interconnected world, we have learned that our fates are tied together. From hundreds of thousands of COVID-19 deaths to the major floods, storms, and wildfires that we have wrecked communities in Europe and America in the past months, it is safe to conclude that we can no longer frame global problems as matters of concern to rich or poor, the powerful and the powerless. The hills are evidence. We are in the same boat, even if on different days. We will sink together unless we work together to avoid the worst case scenario like both experiences. A new dawn of working together is needed to face the world's pressing problems. This assembly offers an opportunity to deepen reflections on how the peoples of the world can come together to tackle the common problems we are facing. Thank you very much, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Mithika ji. You're representing the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, and it's really important that we remember this very, very clearly, and making sure that we demand a climate and environmental justice. Thank you also for keeping such sharply and then giving us the time. I now have great pleasure in inviting Disha Ravi. I think in the part of the country where I come from, India, and there is nobody who will not know Disha Ravi. She's really stood firm against the state and had suffered much. So very, very happy to have you, Disha. Disha here represents the Fridays for Future, but here she also represents a strong resistance against the crushing state and raises her voice strongly. Over to you, Disha.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. It was really nice to hear, and thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Disha. I'm an environmental and climate justice activist with Fridays for Future India. Our work is largely on intersectional environmentalism, striving towards a just and equitable planet. And these seems like big words, like equitable. And there's a reason why we say equitable instead of equality, because it isn't just the three words in the end that's the difference. It's identifying that different sections of the society are entitled to different kinds of resources, and they are entitled to different quantities of these resources. But it is also to understand that the role each person plays in our community. It's understanding that farmers need more land to till, and business owners don't need that land for their summer vacations. It's understanding that women and marginalized communities should be given priority while recognizing that they are as important as men. It is to share our commons such as water, forests, and the produce it creates without poisoning it. Currently, the world's resources are shared, but not in an equitable manner. Lands have been looted away from indigenous people by big corporations for their greed. Venom has been mixed with our waters. We've broken rocks to mine coal. We've slashed trees without the blink of an eye. And we have broken mountains itself, and our world leaders and corporations are still not satisfied. What's worse is that those demanding that our homes, our water, and our commons be left alone are being punished for it. We have been jailed, beaten, starved, and laid siege to, and These people who've had to suffer the worst consequences are the true owners of the land. But we refuse to do nothing. We don't have the privilege of stopping to do our activism because our existence in itself is political. And so is the fight for our home. Despite all of this, my hope comes from the people who dare reimagine a world beyond the binaries, a world where all sentient beings are chosen over all else. I don't expect change to come world leaders who lie about freedom of speech at the G7 while arresting anyone who has a different perspective than their own in their homeland. I don't choose to put my hopes in the hands of colonizers who choose war without a second thought. I choose to put my faith in people who've continued to rise at every single injustice, and there are so many of us. Change is going to start with us, with these people, with our farmers who continue to strike at our capital, with our Adivasis who continue their resistance, and with our students who walked out of jail just a few months ago, smiling after a year of wrongful incarceration. The main challenge we face for a better world, an equitable world, is the lack of political will to make it happen. But what they need to know is that the youth are not going to stay silent. We're going to ensure that climate action is taken. We're going to ensure that a just and equitable planet is achieved. The excessive need for silencing ideas that's different from those of world leaders will not hold us back. Because what they don't realize is that they can put people behind bars, but ideas can never be held back by bricks and iron, because ideas aren't one single person. They can lock us up, but they can never lock up our hope and our love. Our love, our hope, and our ideas for a better planet for all is shared by so many of us, and that will never die. Our love is the kind that crosses oceans, the kind that breaks prisons, and the kind that saves the planet. And we will ensure that there's a just and equitable planet for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Disha. I think that's coming from you, that we will not lie down and we will not take heed of those who are trying to crush us, but put our faith and belief in those communities who are rising every day and demanding an equitable diversity for all of us. Thank you very much. You have been a real model and inspiration to many of us across the world. And may you continue to struggle and hope that these regimes which are trying to crush us will never be able to crush the voice that you're raising. Thank you very much. Before I invite the next speaker, let me just give one request, because I think we need to really make our voice heard. And please kindly participate in the several events, but don't forget to participate in the Global March, which is on the last day. I think it's on the 23rd at 2 p.m. GMT. Kindly register. And here it's not just speaking and speaking, but it's really telling and showing our spirit that we are not going to let this lying down. And many, like what Disha has said, across the world, please let's join this. And we are having this whole group from several regions and constituencies will be saying that we will want another world, and we will make sure that we will not rest until we have the sustainability that we desire. And Disha and on all those speakers here, I request you to please join us and also encourage your colleagues and friends to also join us at the Global March, 23rd, 2 p.m. GMT. It's for 1.5 hours. I would like to invite Mr. Syed Hasnain. He has been really at the forefront, especially after the Afghan crisis. He's the president of the Italian Refugee Council and founder of the European Union COMAR. And he has especially raised the issue of Afghanistan and the situation of the refugees. Over to you, Hasnain. Please come and share your words.
Thank you, Paul. 22 years ago, at the age of 10, my family members attempted to force me to fight for the Taliban. Luckily, my mother helped me escape, and I spent the next 7 years in Pakistan and Iran, then later from which I was arrested, jailed, and repatriated for staying illegally in Iranian territory. From there, I turned to human smugglers to complete a long, dangerous journey that eventually saw me arrive in Italy. Unlike many who have sought refuge abroad, I was fortunate to be able to survive the dangerous and often abusive conditions involved. I found my personal renaissance in Italy after being granted refugee status in 2007. I quickly learned Italian and immediately began working with refugees and asylum seekers. I founded UNIRE, the first national union of refugees in Italy, to make Europe as welcoming for them as it was when I arrived. To me, Italy and Europe are holy places, unlike in my country of origin and the many countries I traveled through to get here. I have found safety and peace in Europe. I am in contact with people right now who have been left behind in Afghanistan under the Taliban's regime of terror who wish to do the same. What will happen to them and to 10-year-old boys living in the Helmand region today, my region? My journey 22 years ago was not easy, but it would be nearly impossible now as countries have taken various steps to fortify the borders against those fleeing for their lives. There is not the Europe I have come to know and love. EU member states with international community were directly involved in the war in Afghanistan and have a moral duty to take all possible measures to protect the many Afghans whose lives are at risk. Furthermore, it is in Europe's strategic interest and also international community's interest to try to prevent further chaos in Afghanistan. It should fight to preserve the gains Western intervention and investment have created in the last 20 years. As recent events have shown, Europe and international community cannot rely on a US-led strategy anymore. The EU and international actions in the next few weeks are critical. As a first step, it should refuse to accept the Taliban as a legitimate government. As an influential trade bloc, the EU and international communities hold significant political and economic levers it can use to negotiate for the preservation of the freedoms and progress made since the Taliban last held power. Adherence to basic human rights, such as women's rights to education and work, needs to be fundamental priority. Second, the EU and international community should recognize that refugees will inevitably make their way to Europe and Western countries. Seeking to barricade its border not only fails the moral test, but it is also only likely to benefit human traffickers. Instead, a coordinated approach is key to avoiding a repeat of 2015 scenario that caught member states off guard. EU member states should therefore lead international responsibility sharing in response to the Afghan crisis and demonstrate their commitment to international values. This entails pledging resettlement places for Afghans, facilitating family reunifications for those with relatives already in Europe and Western countries, offering humanitarian visas, ensuring that all Afghans arriving irregularly are allowed to apply for asylum as their right. If the EU coordinates now to share and resettlement of refugees, it will keep any one country's resources from becoming overburdened. The EU and international community, in coordination with the UN, should also lead by putting pressure on Afghanistan's neighbors to open their borders and provide a safe passage for people fleeing the country. The EU and the UK must not only to save their own citizens and people who collaborate with them in Afghanistan, but also the minorities, activists, journalists, and former government officials whose lives are currently in grave danger. When I arrived in Italy, a local pizza owner welcomed and helped me. His kindness and humanity convinced me that I could find a new home in Italy. If a single citizen can so significantly change the life of another person, then the 27 EU member states and international communities can do much more for many more lives. Europe is currently in a unique position to lead the international response to the Afghan refugee crisis. I urge it to keep from being indifferent in this human crisis and to act urgently to save people's lives. Amid violence and terror, we can ensure protection and peace. I know because I have found them. Thank you.
Thank you, Syed Hasnain. Very, very clearly put. I think the double-edged demands that you're saying, on the one hand, the EU and the global countries should open up its borders and to have the rights of the refugees recognized and give them the kind of shelter that is needed and the rights that are needed, as well as bring a human rights atmosphere within Afghanistan to ensure that the minorities and women and others are really protected. I think we have it's a double responsibility, and we really together as People's Assembly and all the partners, we hope to have these letters. We've already sent some letters, and I think we should confer with you and see what more of a demand that we need to have. But this will be one of the demands of this People's Assembly, as well as the march, global march that will be taking up. Thank you, and all solidarity and power to you as you fight this fight on behalf of not just yourself, your family, but for all of those who are being displaced across anywhere. And thank you very much for your courage. I would like to invite Kumi Naidoo, and he needs no introduction of having several span of leaderships in Greenpeace, Amnesty, and several others. He is currently representing Africa Rising. I was hoping that we will hear him towards the end, but I think it would be good to see if we can hear and inspire and be inspired by him. Over to you, Kumi. Kumi, are you there? Have you lost him, Rose? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
If Kumi takes a while, then...
Hello?
No.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Sort of, not your usual style. We can feebly hear you.
Okay. Is that better? Hi, Paul. Hi, dear brothers and sisters, friends and colleagues. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to be with you here today. I think we have to start by recognizing that the decade that we find ourselves in is probably the most consequential decade in humanity's history. What we achieve in the next 10 years will determine what kind of future we'll have, or whether we will have a future at all. While we have had strong statements about vaccine apartheid, which is absolutely correct, and just like brothers and sisters have said, that vaccine apartheid leads to a situation where if we are not all safe, none of us are safe. We also have global economic apartheid. We also have climate apartheid. And for all of these issues, that same logic actually applies. However, it's critically important we remind ourselves of what Albert Einstein once said, when he said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting to get different results. And I want to humbly say to all of you, having been around for quite a while in the world of fighting for justice, I need to humbly put up my hand and say, I meet that definition of insanity, right? Maybe we all do it in good faith, but this is a time for us to ask ourselves within the activist community, what do we need to do differently? How do we rethink some of the strategies that have not yet delivered that which we have been fighting for a very long time? And with your permission, I want to share a graphic which I want to say one of the changes that we need to make is that while we focus correctly on how people are exploited, marginalized, excluded, and are made powerless, I think if we are to win, we also have to consciously ask ourselves, not only what power people do not have, but what power people actually have. And with your permission, I'm hoping I can share the screen. I'm not very good at technology, so please bear with me. Can you all see that, folks?
Not yet.
If you press the green button at the bottom that says share screen.
Now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I offer this to the conversation of saying that part of what we must do in our movements much more strongly than we do, I believe, is to also, in the context of people having been deprived of so much of rights and so on, we must remind ourselves that we still collectively have power. So each of the outlying circles, we start reading it from the center. People have power as many things. So I want to start with harnessing our autonomy. People have power, of course, as citizens and voters. People have power as enforcers of transparency and accountability. People have power as shapers of our own destiny in the work that many of us are part of, movements, NGOs, trade unions, etc. And people have power as volunteers taking action for the public good. In my country, South Africa, and in many countries across the world, during the pandemic, were it not for the immense amount of generosity, love, and kindness shown by ordinary people towards other people who were in more dire straits, thousands and thousands of more lives would have been lost. Then we need to look at harnessing our creative participation. People have power as custodians of ancient wisdom. One of the things colonialism sought to do was decimate and destroy many of the indigenous knowledge systems. We need to harness and build what is left, because in there lies some of the solutions to the problems that we face today. People also have power as shapers of values, ethics, and beliefs, and people have power as makers of culture and all forms of art. Let me say something unpopular here, and that is, I believe the right-wing movements, whether it's Modi in India, whether it's Trump in the United States, whether it's Bolsonaro in Brazil, these right-wing movements actually understand something better than we progressives understand, which is politics does not drive culture. Culture drives politics. And unless we are much more committed, listening to ordinary people, engaging with ordinary people, drawing on their knowledge, using the imagery and the language that people use, I believe we will find it really hard to win the big struggles that lay ahead. On the top right-hand corner, people have power. We need to also look at harnessing our wealth, right? So people have power as owners of capital and assets. Maybe each of us don't have so much, but I will give you an example. When we look at that second circle, people have power as holders of bank accounts. Now, I'll give you an example from Australia. I can give you an example from the Amazon. But the Australia example goes like this. When the government wanted to build the biggest coal mine, the ordinary people in Australia in 2015 went outside the banks day in, day out, protested, and eventually all 4 of the banks in Australia said, we will not fund that coal mine, right? Unfortunately, through some other financing mechanisms, it's reduced a lot. It might still go ahead. But the point I'm making is that whether we have 5 Rand in the bank account or $5 million, dollars in the bank account, if we begin to understand that we need to shut the flow of capital from harmful investments that violate human rights, that violate women's rights, that take us closer to the climate cliff, if we are able to mobilize that, as has been done in many parts of the world in different moments of history, that is part of our power as well. And also we need to harness our consumption. People have power as consumers of information and disinformation, and people have power as consumers of energy, food, and everything else. And we know in many countries, we have used consumer campaigns to get big corporations to change the behavior. So I want to suggest that Martin Luther King's words to us in 1965 is exceptionally strong right now, and I'd like to close with it. Speaking in 65, he said, "My friends, as I come to the end of my speech, I want to note in the field of modern child psychology, there's a very dominant term called maladjusted. No one, he said, we all don't want to suffer from schizophrenia or other mental illnesses. But he goes on to say, but my friends, there are some things in our world that are so unjust and immoral that good, decent people should refuse to be well adjusted to. He goes on to say, I never intend to adjust myself to religious bigotry, racial discrimination. And on the economy, he says, I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few when millions of God's children are smothering in an airtight cage of poverty. In a longer version of the speech, he says, I call upon decent women and men around the world to come together to set up a new international movement to be known as the International Association for the Advancement of Creative Maladjustment, meaning people who are refusing to accept the status quo. And I look at some of the comments in the chat and I agree with them, where people are saying, for example, let's change our language. Let's not call them world leaders. These are world disasters. Many of these folks are actually, yes, they might have formal power, right? But they are not acting in the interest of the people that they're supposed to lead. So I'd like to conclude by saying that part of the challenge moving forward is we have to push for a new social contract, a new understanding of what is the basic minimum expectations of governments to people. Unless we can have a new, and bear in mind, the social contract has been broken for many people. Sometimes people talk about, oh, the social contract just got broken after COVID. The social contract has been broken, as you know very well, Paul, for the Dalit community who runs into hundreds of millions of people. It's been broken for indigenous people. It's been broken for women. It's been broken for older people and so on. So basically, this is a moment that I want to conclude by saying is an exciting moment. Yes, things have not been as bad as it's ever been in my living memory. But I ask the people of my age who got the same amount of gray hair as I do, like Paul and others, to answer this question. Can you remember any moment in your activist history when the possibility of big structural and systemic change was as high as it is now? So dear colleagues and friends, dear comrades, do not let the pessimism of this moment, of all the bad things that are happening, the repression and so on, push us back. And remember that the pessimism of our analysis can only be overcome by the optimism of our progressive, dynamic, courageous action. I wish you well in this People Assembly and I wish you well in all the work that you're doing. Victory is certain. We don't have an option but to continue to fight, and we don't have an option but to try to secure this planet. Not to save the planet, but to secure this planet for our children, their children, and future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kumi. I think this is very, very well said. And then remind ourselves that we are many, that we cannot continue to disempower ourselves, but to ensure that we do have a power that we need to exercise as a consumer, as a people who exercise our votes, as a people who are doing several other things that they feel that we don't have a say in the matters. And they are not the rulers, they're exploiters. And I think this is something that we need to continue to remind ourselves. Thank you very much for being with us, and I hope you will stay for some more time. But I know that you have some other engagement, but to the extent that you can say, please continue to be. Thank you very much once again, Kumi. I now have great privilege in welcoming Georgina Muñoz, who is the leader of the LATINDADD, fighting debt and austerity measures, especially in this COVID. She's also my colleague as co-chair of GCAP. Please look to the translation at the bottom and make sure that you're in the language that you would like to hear. And Georgina will be speaking in Spanish. Over to you, Georgina. Georgina, can you unmute?
I think we don't. Do you see Georgina?
She was here till.
Yeah, I could see her earlier. I saw her earlier.
Yeah.
She was here and then she left, and I just added her in again, and now she's left again. So I don't know if she's having technical issues.
So why don't you try and maybe you can call her? We will move on. I have now a very important leader of the Women's Caucus, Mrinalini Rai. She heads the Women's Caucus at UN Biodiversity, and she's going to give us the Indigenous women's perspective. Over to you, Mrinalini. I saw you earlier.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Can you see me or hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you so much for the invitation to be here. So I'll begin with that the UN Nation Secretary General's report titled Our Common Agenda, which was just launched recently on 10 September 2021, prior to the opening of the 76th session of the UN General Assembly, proposes actions. And one of them is a renewed social construct anchored in human rights to advance the 12 commitments made by world leaders last year in September 2020 at the United Nations 75th anniversary. Human rights and a healthy planet are mutually dependent. There is a growing narrative that if we protect biodiversity, climate crisis and desertification would be a thing of the past. As we celebrate nature and its contribution to post-pandemic recovery, we need to ensure that to have a safe, clean, and healthy environment, we have to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights. While the human rights implication of environmental damages are felt by individuals and communities around the world, the consequences are felt more acutely by the segments of populations that are already in vulnerable situations, including indigenous peoples and local communities, small-scale farmers and fisher folks, and majority of whom are women and children. Indigenous women and girls face a disproportionately higher risk of violation of their human rights through exclusion from decision-making spaces, vulnerability to different forms of gender-based violence, the advanced impacts of the gender digital divide, and the limited exercise of their land rights. And the COVID pandemic all have made these situations more challenging. In the growing call for reinvigorating multilateralism to achieve an equal and resilient world, we do not believe in a multilateralism that races to the lowest common denominator, but one that fosters global solidarity and learning. Multilateralism is not an arena for geopolitical skirmishes, but for cooperation. Multilateralism should not be another space for the dominance of multinational corporations, but a space for the people, especially those in vulnerable situations. Further, there is also a need for strengthening environmental and social safeguarding systems, both for biodiversity and climate finance, including terms of implementation and accountability. The UN human rights instruments and mechanisms, including the CEDAW, provide a framework for and critical support to efforts to achieve such enjoyment in all policies areas. Gender-responsive approaches identify and lead to actions to address gaps and constraints in women's enjoyment of human rights, including access to environmental justice. In the path to build back better and just, to transform our current dysfunctional system, we need to bend the curve of inequality and injustice and embed a human rights approach to a healthy environment. Building resilience through hope is not possible if there are no foundational principles in place to ensure equity, justice, and rights for all. This, including the recognition of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP, and the United Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and Other People Working in Rural Areas, UNDROPS, that would set the international norms and standards into legislations, policies, and programs. In the face of the global risks, rapid evidence-based, inclusive, participatory, and collective actions not only produce the best results, it is also fulfilling human rights obligations. Effective response to COVID-19 and environmental crisis, and for the global response to it, have to be grounded in solidarity, compassion, respect for dignity, and ecological integrity. Women, girls, and non-binary folks are not part of the problem, but a part of the solution. It is time to take action now to ensure that every woman, girl, and LGBTQI+ individuals' right to dignity is realized. This is not our hope, this is our demand. We need gender justice and we need it now. Thank you for giving the space to present here.
Thank you, Mrinalini. I think that is very, very well said. You cannot continue to wait, cannot continue to exclude, and we need gender justice, especially the intersectionality with the minorities, with the indigenous, with the communities discriminated on work and descent, and several other identities that we have seen that continue to exclude us. And especially from the point of view of biodiversity and the environment, we must demand this. I take a minute also to remind ourselves of another similar such communities. I come from those communities discriminated on work and descent. They're known in several names: Dalits here in South Asia, Buraku in Japan, Haratin and several other communities from Asia who have been continued to be enslaved. And many of these Sahel and several other countries, including the West Africa, Kenya and others, have systems which are similar to the caste system. And we are not sufficiently raising the voice. So also the issue of Roma, Gypsy, Sinti, and other communities in Europe. We are raising, but then these communities continues to be invisible. And communities like Quilombola in Brazil. And together we have come together at the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Descent, similar to the caste systems across Asia, but all these have continuously been denied. And Kumi and several others know, way back in 2001, when the World Conference Against Racism has brought, they have shut our voices, but then we said we will not allow this to continue. And today we are again banding ourselves, rebanding ourselves. And we want to say that you cannot continue to shut out these communities. And sometimes it is not governments who are shutting us out. It is our own wider societies, within our societies. We are excluding our own sisters and brothers who have the same culture. And we are not allowing because of the systems of hierarchy that we have imbibed through ages. And I think this is something that we cannot continuously only blame on the governments, but we need to make sure that the civil society and the wider society continues to break this internalization of the hierarchies and expression of these communities which are being enslaved in our own cultures. And I think this we need to break out. And I join Mrinalini and several others, this intersectionality, whether it is environment, whether it is education, whether it is any other human rights, that continue to make sure that these communities' rights are also at the front and they are not just continue to be left behind. So thank you very much, Mrinalini, for bringing this. And I would like to request now, Georgina, I'm glad you're back with your beautiful garden behind. We envy your garden. So please, over to you. You have 4 minutes. And I've already introduced you earlier, so I will not waste any more time. Over to you, Georgina.
Gracias, Paul. Un saludo a todos los participantes en la Asamblea Popular Global. Nicaragua es un ejemplo concreto de la desigualdad tecnológica. Aquí en cada momento hay interrupciones de la internet, por eso no pude entrar en el momento que exponía Paul. Voy a cerrar un poco la cámara para poder mantener más estable la internet. Bien, la crisis y la pandemia es una oportunidad para el desarrollo que demandan los pueblos del mundo. Pareciera algo ilógico, pero es una realidad. Eso requiere voluntad política de quienes tienen el poder, y sobre todo el poder económico y político. Prácticamente yo me voy a referir un poco más al ámbito en Latinoamérica en temas de carácter económico. A partir de la crisis de la deuda en América Latina, en la década de los 80, la intervención del Fondo Monetario Internacional para inyectar liquidez a los países ha estado acompañada de una serie de condicionamientos, de privatizaciones y restricciones del gasto público, lo que limita a la mayor parte de países de la región a orientar recursos hacia inversiones productivas y mejorar socialmente las demandas que plantea la población. En ese marco, nuestros países no hemos podido aún resolver los déficits externos estructurales y nos hemos visto obligados a acudir a más endeudamiento. Prácticamente pagar el servicio de la deuda generó crear otra deuda histórica que tenemos pendiente con nuestros pueblos en materia de seguridad social, de infraestructura, diversificación productiva, porque la dependencia hacia las exportaciones de nuestros recursos naturales y materias primas sin transformación ha incrementado esa vulnerabilidad que es económica, que es social, que es ecológica y que es política. La mayoría de los países de la región se encontraban enfrentando esta situación de endeudamiento, tanto interno como externo, y el déficit fiscal cuando llega la pandemia en 2020. Prácticamente ya éramos una región desigual, la más desigual del planeta, y a esta situación de la pandemia se sumaron 45 millones de nuevos pobres, y la recesión más profunda tenemos en la región prácticamente. Con muy pocas posibilidades de financiamiento propio, el gasto fiscal ha sido insuficiente para evitar el colapso sanitario, social y económico. La misma CEPAL advierte de las altas probabilidades de otra década perdida, a menos que dispongamos del dinero suficiente para la atención sanitaria, la compra de las vacunas, las transferencias monetarias directas a la población y los subsidios, entre otros gastos, deben de ser financiados con recursos públicos, porque si estamos hablando también de implementar la Agenda 2030 como una opción de desarrollo para nuestros pueblos, necesitamos recursos. En nuestra región, lamentablemente, la respuesta ha sido profundizar las medidas de austeridad. Muchos países han acudido a líneas de créditos flexibles y otros programas con el Fondo Monetario Internacional, pero han sido orientados a iniciar recortes de gasto público en el corto plazo. Y eso no permite implementar políticas públicas que demandan la ciudadanía y sobre todo dar solución al COVID-19. Se quiere dejar en manos del mercado de la inversión privada la reactivación de la economía, cuando en las décadas anteriores fue incapaz de generar crecimiento económico equitativo y sostenible ambientalmente. Las enormes brechas de género en el mercado laboral, los altos niveles de desempleo de la juventud, el atraso científico y tecnológico de la región y por qué no decirlo en el mundo, en los países de bajos ingresos, genera más pobreza y desigualdad galopante. Son pruebas de que el mercado ha sido muy efectivo en orientar la inversión hacia actividades extractivistas rentables en el corto plazo, pero incapaz de propiciar el desarrollo sostenible que aspiramos. Corresponde entonces a los gobiernos asumir la orientación de una economía alternativa que sirva al bienestar de su población, más que satisfacer la voracidad de las especulaciones financieras. Desde la comunidad financiera internacional, se necesitan fuentes de financiamiento en condiciones muy favorables, como las que establecen los derechos especiales de giro, que la mayoría de países ha preferido dejar en reservas internacionales. También es necesario hablar, ¿verdad?, de alivio y reestructuración de la deuda y en la imposibilidad de que la región salga de la crisis con medidas de austeridad. Gracias, creo que se venció mi tiempo.
Thank you, Georgina. Thank you very much for bringing this very, very important aspect of bringing this whole issue of austerity at a time when governments need to release and ensure that the financing is and putting money into the hands of the communities. And instead, they're putting this into the private companies and giving them as though the money has to trickle down. I think this kind of a double talk, which you have shared, that we need to really resist, is very, very important at this stage. And financing for development, not of corporations, but financing for making sure that the communities are able to survive. And we've seen how the pandemic has completely decimated several of the enterprises, the informal sector, and several other, and then they're building another layer of poverty that is becoming completely extremely difficult for us to challenge. So I think this is a very important aspect, and I'm sure this is form a part of our major demands that we're going to put up. Thank you very much. Friends, we are coming to the end. May I also request now Oli Henman, who we all know well, and then he would like to take us through the whole aspect of the vaccine alliance and the kind of campaigns that needs to be taken up. And over to you, Oli. Please take us through.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's great to see so many colleagues on this call and such incredibly strong statements that have been delivered already today. I think we're really gathering our strengths and connecting the dots between so many different campaigns and different movements and different key themes. And so I just wanted to highlight with just a minute or so some of how we might connect those themes. Some of you on this call have already been involved with us over this past year in drawing together a kind of open letter which highlights the need for a healthy, green and just recovery. Many of those on this call, like Kumi and others, have been key signatories to this letter. We took it to the G7. We asked the G7 around vaccine equity. We know that that didn't get the result that we wanted, and we stand very closely with the People's Vaccine Alliance. And so we're proposing that we take this letter again now to UNGA and on to COP. And just at this point at UNGA, we know that there is an opportunity because Joe Biden is calling a special meeting on the vaccine. So if it's possible, I just want to share my screen very briefly because we had a go at updating that letter specifically for this meeting that Joe Biden will be hosting. And I hope that many of you can get behind it and help us to make some noise. So this is what it looks like, very much in line with the People's Vaccine Alliance. It highlights that we've been calling for the vaccine for all. It highlights some of the huge gaps around the vaccine apartheid that's already been highlighted today. And it calls for some very, very specific steps that we want to see from the G7, from Joe Biden, and from major countries at this point. So please get behind that, and looking forward to working with all of you throughout these coming days in the People's Assembly, and then beyond that, as Kumi says, to build that decade of change that we need to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Oli, very sharp and clear, and taking us. I think we really need to get behind this and continue to not only social media, of course, social media is very important, but mobilize the communities with us. And I think on the one hand, as we educate and continue to strengthen the resilience, we need to make sure that this voice gets heard at several layers. Ingo, just to test, are we okay for time? I know we only have a few, or we just run out.
We are actually at the end of the time, but we still have some important points. So I would propose that we continue.
So with the permission of all the participants, I request a few more minutes, as Ingo is requesting us to stay. There are some important aspects. We have Sarah, who will take us through the whole process of the assembly. And another important aspect of the declaration, I think many of you have participated in designing and drafting and contributing to the evolution of this declaration, which so painstakingly has been taken by Michael. He will also share, and I think some concerns he will raise, and he will also put the process so that we adopt the declaration at the global march that we will have. And then we will have Anal, who will take us through the social media, which is also important if we want to be heard by the community. So over to you, Sarah. If you can keep to time, I think we'll be very, we'll try to have this in time to close. Over to you, Sarah, please.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you to all the amazing speakers that have come before here. Before I shared the program with you, I just wanted to thank all of the amazing co-hosts and co-organizers who rallied together to bring this event to you. And over the next 3 days, people from 7 continents and 80 countries are gathering together as part of this Global People's Assembly. And as our speakers have shown, we represent a diverse and powerful global network of national coalitions, constituency groups, and initiatives for advocacy and mobilization at the regional and the global levels. So we bring together the voices of the most marginalized and vulnerable groups in order to influence these international processes and institutions, to inspire them to create massive change. This is our opportunity to collaborate in solidarity around the key issues that the world is facing. This is a global conference, but it starts with each and every one of us as individuals having experience of love for humanity and our beautiful planet. So why are we here? A Native American proverb that is highly appropriate for this Global People's Assembly says, "Think not of your rights, but of your obligations." And as the SDGs highlight, our obligations are to our Mother Earth, our fellow human beings, to the animals, and to future generations. And I want to bring something into this plenary that was shared this morning at the European Assembly by Syed Hasnain, whom you have just heard. He shared this profound statement. All it took was one act of human kindness to change the course of my life forever. Although we may not realize how our actions may transform the life of another, and how that individual, because of his or her lived experience, will transform the lives of perhaps hundreds of thousands of others, we're all here today in the global effort to transform the lives of all those in need. This assembly is our collective way to present a 3-day window to the world. It's a platform for everyone attended to be inspired by how others are making these transformations each and every day, and to redouble our efforts as we must in order to realize the targets of the SDGs. So it's time to take action now. And I'm going to briefly take you through our program. So Paul called us earlier on and called out our Global People's Assembly themes, which are people's vaccines and health, and climate and environmental justice, human rights and civic space, austerity and social protection, financing for development, and pathways to peace and conflict. I'm wondering, Rose, if you would very kindly share the program on the screen, that would be great. Are you there, Rose? Ah, great. Yeah, thank you. If we could just go back to the start of it where the links are, thank you. So we will see here coming up is, if we can go to where all the links are, great. Here we go. So first of all of the programs are, the time is GMT, Universal Time. So can we go to where the actual program for all the links is? Yeah, just the actual, that's it, the overall links. I'm not going to go through every single one for you, but just to say how easy it is to, with this program, all you have to do is click on the actual link itself. If you click on any link in anywhere, it immediately takes you to where that program is. It tells you about the program, about the speakers, and you click on that link there to attend the event. And so when you click on that, it takes you immediately to the Zoom. If you want to share this to the friends and colleagues, there's a link for registration. We would highly encourage you to share that link widely. As you can see, there is a huge range of programs that we have offered. And behind each and every one of these titles, it looks like, oh yes, I know what social protection and austerity is, or financing for development. There is a wealth of human experience behind every single one of these presentations, where people collectively have come together with their decades of experience in how we are going to tackle the world's problems. So I encourage you all to join as many of these events as possible. If you've been inspired by our speakers so far, we encourage you to take the time to replenish the fire in your soul by actively joining here with us. And Paul, I'd like to finish with an old Zen proverb, and it goes like this. It says, if there is light in the soul, there will be beauty in the person. If there is beauty in the person, there will be harmony in the home. If there's harmony in the home, there will be order in the nation. And if there's order in the nation, there will be peace in the world. So thank you all very much for joining us. And I look forward to seeing each and every one of you at these different events that we're about to embark upon for 3 days. Thank you, Paul. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm amazed at how the whole team have put together such a fantastic plethora of programs. You know, I would have gone crazy trying to coordinate. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you have around 21 events that are going on in these 3 days, or maybe more. And then what? Sorry?
We have about 21 to 23 events, and this is just an example of power to the people. This is what we can do. We did this in an incredibly short space of time. It's unreasonable to think it could have been. So this is really testimony to what the power of people, of organized people, can do.
Yes, yes. Despite all restrictions of travel, pandemic, whatever, internet connectivity, you made this possible. Thank you so much. And for really summing it up with a beautiful proverb, which I'll not attempt to repeat, but I think that order is something we anarchists would need to somehow try to adopt. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Michael. Michael has been toiling for I think he has been disturbing me, at least, I know many of you, for the last, I think, at least 3 weeks. Since he has taken this up, and even more, and he wrenched the interventions from all of us and then brought that and squeezed it into a draft. And I will not take any more time. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you everyone who's here today. It's an honor to be part of this Global People's Assembly. I also have the honor of being the lead editor and writer for the declaration that the GPA will put out. I'm part of a team, the declaration working group, that has more than half a dozen people on it. Why are we doing this? Do we just want to have another document? No. COVID-19 is a wake-up call, and we are oversleeping. That's the UN Secretary General. If I can draw on another quote, this pandemic is a portal. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. Like Kumi pointed out, we have the power. We, the people left behind, have the power. So what we're doing in this declaration is we're bringing together the content of the Global People's Assembly, and we're putting it forward in a format that says, listen, we're not going to stand for this anymore. So what we've done so far is develop the declaration working group of 8 people. We've done a draft. It's composed of partners from the organizing committee of this GPA. All the partner organizations, the 30 or so that Ingo introduced at the beginning, are having a chance to comment on it now, and you can comment on it as well. So in the plenary tomorrow at 1500 GMT, we will present the draft declaration. You should have it sometime tomorrow morning, so a chance to look at it. We'll be sharing the link with you, and you can make your comments either in that hour plenary session or online on the document. We'll take all those comments on board and bring you back another document a day later, hopefully one that this GPA will be proud to endorse. And with that, I'm going to steal a quote from Paul and from the Dalit people in India. Let us continue to do what is possible. And soon when we look back, we will realize that we have done the impossible. Thank you, and back to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Michael, your persistence and the way that you have brought ideas, and not just dead ideas, but trying to see how we can make really a difference and regaining and reclaiming the power that we have, and saying that we are indeed resilient, and therefore we will declare something. And I think I invite you all, please take a look. I know we are overwhelmed by several events, but please, this is important. Look at it and give your contributions, and afterwards, don't forget to tweet, don't forget to put it on Facebook, and make sure that you pass it widely. We are also inviting all of you to translate into the languages that our communities are most comfortable with, that we will translate it in several languages here, and also translate into Spanish, Portuguese. It's already being done, but kindly take it to many more languages in the way that our communities understand, so that, you know, we will not allow these to overwhelm us, but we will break through. That is there. Thank you, Michael. We are coming to an end, but very important aspect, which is critical because of the digitalized world we are forced to be. I think one of the important tools is the social media, and they have put, as Sarah has said, in a very short time, tremendous amount of powerful images. And Anil, I do not know whether I'm pronouncing you right. Please excuse me. But you know, I invite you to share about the social media package that you have done so widely, and also inviting all of us to take note and tweet as we speak. Over to you, Anil, is it?
Yeah.
Is that how? Yeah.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm in charge of social media for the Global People Assembly 2021. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see? Okay, super. So this is the Trello, where you can find a lot of different images in 3 languages, so Spanish, English, and French. So you can just click on one image, they are classified by themes. So movement against inequality, justice, vaccine and health and participation. So you can just click on an image, choose which one you want in Spanish, in French, for Instagram stories, for Twitter, and then you can just click and copy paste on all your Twitter, on all your social networks. And there are examples of different tweets in the descriptions here. So this, the shadow is for all the different images that you can put on your social media. And then you also have an Excel document with a lot of different examples of tweets. You also have it in three language, so English, Spanish, and French. So you can choose one and just copy paste. You can also change it so that it is better for your situation, and so that you can adapt it to your message. So it is really important that you share, that you retweet and share on a lot of social network the events, so that a lot of people can join us and so that a lot of people can share their message. And please use the hashtag People Assembly, turn it around, Act for SDGs, and you can also tag us and tag as many organizations as possible, so that more people can see. So yes, please make a lot of publicity with this Trello account and Excel document. We can share the link in the chat. Yeah, Ingo already did it. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anel. A very, very, very interesting and easy to understand package that you've developed for us. We can add whatever we want, but kindly, at least, I know you're all pressed for time, use this and continuously tweet. Some of us are like me, I'm not so active, but I think we need to make an effort to see that we put these messages and tag as many people, including our own presidents, prime ministers, and people who are supposed to be representing us everywhere. Thank you very much. We're coming to the end, and you know, I think it's so important that we need to say that we will not allow ourselves to be completely disempowered. And though it is so overwhelming, and we once again remind ourselves, and Kumi also has been sharing, that we have the power and we need to realize this. And I would like to end again with another Martin Luther's quote, saying that, you know, if you cannot fly, run. If you cannot run, walk. If you cannot walk, crawl. But if you cannot crawl, at least raise your fist and then continue to look straight into the eye and say, we will not allow you to crush our voice. And I think we have much, much more power. And like Michael has said, you know, it's just a step that we'll have to take. And I'm always inspired by this native saying that, you know, we hear, I do not know which saying, some of us, you know, the wisdom comes, but we don't somehow remember the names. But this is a really inspiring thing. Let us begin to do what is possible. And soon, when we realize, when you look back, you realize that we have done the impossible. And I'm sure all of us are doing the impossible, right from Disha, whom we have seen, and Mrinalini, and all those who have spoken. I really would like to mention each of their names: Peter, Maaza, Mithika, of course, Disha, Syed Hasnain, Kumi, and Georgina, Mrinalini, and of course, Oli. All of you have inspired us. Thank you very much for this very tremendous opening in the way that we remember. And from several perspectives, I think we have power that we are going to regain. And thank you, Oli, once again for continuing to push us on. And I think we have to do some of these things for the people at the UN to hear. I don't think we can close this without really once again acknowledging the tremendous effort that has been put by the team, Ingo and Sarah, Anel, Michael, and all those who are behind, the interpreters who have been here, and the team who has been. I was thinking how it is possible to put this. I think they made this possible. Thank you very much for all this. And I think the least that we'll have to do is to make sure that we tweet, participate, we allow others, we remind others to participate, and don't forget the global march. I think we need the chanting. All of you, Kumi, Disha, Mrinalini, and Peter, and Maaza, and Hasnain, we'd like you all to be in the front of that time. And Georgina, please, you have to be in the front, lead the march. It's just for 2 hours or 1.5, 2 hours. And we have great chanting. It is necessary that sometimes, we feel so disconnected in this pandemic. So I think this is necessary for us to bring together. So Jai Bhim, Ola, Opraroma, and bonjour to all of you. And if there is anything, Ingo, please have the last few words.
Thank you to Paul. I also, I don't want to repeat. It was really very deep and interesting. So I think we have the power. This session has shown. So please join the sessions and bring the power into the sessions. And let's come all together into the Global People's March on Thursday to bring our power, to bring the message to the UN, to the governments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great seeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Kumi, after a long time.
Bye, everyone.